I thought I'd seen Monster X. I didn't. I saw Monster Land. Because I'm sitting here like, I have never seen this before.
Yeah. I mean, and some of those, I mean, I can talk about that. A lot of those short films, like I made like 2008, and like they got licensed by that particular company. And then they've just been putting them in all these anthologies. And so I'll be on IMDb and I'm like, I didn't have anything to do with this. And then I click on it and then I'm like, oh yeah, my short film is in it. I have mixed feelings because they paid a one-time licensing fee, but they've milked it, but my other thought process is that, those movies played out, and they'll never be seen again unless they're put in some type of anthology, because short films kind of have a shorter lifespan, so.
True.
Kimberly here. This is Macabish, Cults, Classics, and Horrors. We're talking films, series, books, and life, and we're starting right now.
Okay, well, I actually grew up in a small town in Nebraska, and had a local movie theater and all that. So like it was, I was a kid in the 80s, and so my parents were taking me to the movies pretty early on, and then so I always wanted to make movies. That was just something I've always wanted to do, and so I would act out movies in my backyard, and my neighbors thought I was crazy.
Awesome.
So I would be doing all the voices myself and all that fun stuff. But anyway, so by the time I got to high school, though, in the 90s, it was we for whatever reason, our high school had its own channel that broadcast to all the TVs in town who had cable. And it was specifically for football and basketball games and sporting events. But I started making these goofy little movies and putting them on TV whenever I wanted. They gave me like carte blanche. I was just like, I was 17 and I was getting to make these really corny videos. And so that's kind of where I got the bug. And then, once I graduated from high school, I went to community college in Nebraska and then ended up transferring to the University of Kansas in Lawrence. And that's kind of where, that's where I went to film school. Kevin Wilmott was one of my main professors. He ended up winning the Academy Award for writing the movie Blackkklansman.
Oh.
And so he's always been kind of a mentor to me. And I decided to not rush out to Los Angeles after graduating. I graduated from KU in December of 2002. So it's been a while. And I stuck around the area and worked at a TV station in Lawrence, and then just started making some short films with them. Actually, they started putting together like a little budget for me annually to make some short films. And then eventually I started making features, and I just decided to stick around, and I moved to Kansas City in 2010, my wife and I, and so I have not left the area, and I've just stuck to making films. Most of my feature films have been made in Kansas City. Arbor Demon is the one exception. We shot that in Charleston, South Carolina. That was just a unique opportunity right there, but I mean, most of my films have all been shot in Kansas City. And so I've worked with a lot of the same people over the years and continue to do so. I'm actually producing on a feature film in March. So I'm working with a lot of the same people there. I'm not directing this one. I'm producing. And so, we've managed to stay busy over the years and somehow sustained a living. So, I'm grateful for that. So
that's great. I'm really surprised because, as we know, most people do run right to California or New York. And I think you're one of the very few. I think we've had one person here, John Iceberg, who he stayed in Illinois mostly. Oh, and of course Jill Six.
And Jill is a good friend of mine, and she's stuck around here as well. So, I mean, I think it's one of those things now where, with the way technology is, times have changed. I mean, I think that you can make movies wherever you are and make it happen. Because, I mean, we have the same equipment that you can find in Los Angeles now, and a lot of talented people have stuck around and built their careers here and stuff. So I feel like it's just a different time.
Oh yeah, I agree.
There's probably less competition and shit too there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the price of living is way less. That's the thing, is I think a lot of people go out to Los Angeles and are just shocked at the cost of living. And out here, it's like you can make it work. So
yeah, I live in Texas, and obviously filmmaking has come here.
yeah,
And a town that I grew up in, Lockhart, it's kind of a rural, right outside of Austin.
yeah,
Place. You could live really cheap there. My gosh, a shack is $1 million there now. Y'all can't afford to live here anymore.
right,
So
exactly.
everybody's moving out.
Yeah, and
Unfortunately.
exactly, and I think that's why. And obviously the price of living is going up everywhere.
Sure.
We were lucky enough to buy our house in 2017, so now our mortgage is less than some people's rent,
Yeah.
and so we were just lucky in that regard. But yeah, I feel like, you can have some breathing room to be creative out here rather than constantly worrying about all your costs.
Absolutely. So what was your first gig that paid a bill?
Oh, interesting. Well, funny enough, my first actual movie set that I was ever on was the movie Election with Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon.
Oh,
Wow.
I was 17, and I had met Alexander Payne the previous summer at because he's originally from Nebraska. And I met him at a film event and talked to him for a little bit. And then when they started making the movie Election, the production company called me and asked my parents if I could come. And I came on set for a few days and helped out as a production assistant. So that was actually my first introduction into the filmmaking world. And it was interesting because I remember thinking to myself, man, this takes a long time. Like I remember thinking, each shot, this is just, wow, this is really slow. And it's funny because it's like from an outside perspective, that's the way it seems. But when you're directing, it feels like you don't have enough time.
Yeah.
Your brain is completely rewired at that point. When you're directing, you're like, I can't believe it's been 6 hours and I still have all this stuff left to shoot.
Mhm.
So, and I would say my first paid, I got to think about that.
Okay.
I mean, it's probably back in 2006 where I actually started paying people to make a film. I actually hired people and like paid them, and it was amazing. I was like, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be. And so obviously I always tell people, pay yourself. You have to pay yourself.
Right.
When you're making a film, you have to have yourself in the budget. I know some people are like, well, I'll pay everybody else. No, you're the one who's going to be doing most of the work in the end, especially if you're also editing, which I also do my own editing on top of directing. So, which is like, it's funny because whenever we wrap a movie, everybody's giving each other hugs, like their work is done. And I'm like, I have so much more work to do on this thing. So, it's funny because we've been finishing out a couple projects. I have that film Super Happy Fun Clown that I'm still working on. And I mean, like it's been about close to a year of editing and post-production, and I'm there every step of the way. So, once the movie's actually, I always say, I don't even really, once the movie's released, you're still with it too, because you're keeping track of the distribution and keeping track of all that stuff. And so it really never ends. It's like Nailbiter, which is a film that came out in 2013, is now been revitalized on Tubi. And so it's like you just don't feel like you're ever really done. It's always with you. So
Right. Nailbiter, I think, was my first film of yours that I saw. I don't remember where I don't remember if it was a rent. What I remember of it was some people in a basement.
Yep.
Some kind of gremlins, metal teeth. I lost track of that movie. I could not remember the name of that film for years. That was one of the ones I'm Googling. Horror film, basement.
Yeah.
Metal teeth gremlins, sci-fi horror. Like years until I was just buying movies, basement horror movies. And then one day I found it and I couldn't believe it. The relief and the frustration, I don't even know where I saw it. I remember thinking, this is so unique. It's like a werewolf movie. But instead of the moon waking them up, storms and lightning.
Yeah.
And their teeth is metal. This is fucking awesome.
Yeah. And that's why we have been trying to make a sequel to that movie for years. And it's all because the reality of when you release a film and you go through a distributor, and whether or not you make the money back that you put into the film, whether this distributor is going to be honest with you. I mean, I'm transparent with people about distribution. I'm like, depending on who you go with, you're putting your neck on the line on whether or not you're going to get your money back or not, because they'll keep all the money. So it's tricky in that regard, because I wanted to go out and shoot the second one immediately. and pick up where we left off. And now it's been 12 years and I have a sequel planned that I want to do that's a little bit more of its own thing, yet still connects to the first movie because it's been so long, and it's been kind of a frustrating process. And I think now with it kind of picking up some more steam on Tubi with people, I think that maybe I can convince some investors potentially to make a second one, but it's been frustrating. And then, other projects crop up and I have to take them or pursue them. So, it's been on the back burner for a while. So, I mean, and there's actually been like 2 different full scripts written for the second one. Yeah. And one was like, yeah, guys, we don't have $20 million. Let's write like we do. And so, it's one of those things where, I want to revisit it really badly. And I think I will at some point. It's just, I've got other projects that I've been working on and if I could clone myself or clone money, that would be great. I could make it happen. But yeah, I think it's definitely, it's funny because it's like all of a sudden, that movie it kind of went quiet for a while because they were airing it on a channel called Chiller back in.
That's where I saw it, Chiller.
Yeah. And that channel, when it went away, like we had a lot of kind of a growing fan base for that movie because of that channel. And then that channel went away.
And it went away.
And it went kind of silent for a while. And I had moved on. And then all of a sudden I see it cropping up on Tubi, which the distributor didn't tell me that was even going to happen. I just happened to be on Tubi and there it is. And so it seems like a lot more people are reaching out to me on a weekly basis. I had somebody reach out to me last week saying, is there still a sequel planned for this movie? It's probably frustrating for people who watch it and they're like, well, this is kind of like a to be continued. And we fully intended to do that. And then it just becomes and any independent filmmaker can kind of understand that it becomes a money thing. It just becomes, it's not that we don't want to do it. It's just finding the money and getting it, doing it right and all that, the creature mold and all the creature puppet is actually in my storage in my house. So it's, it needs a little bit of it needs some upkeep, but I think it could still work. But yeah, I have what I think to be an interesting idea for a sequel and I think could connect. So we'll see what happens.
Was Nailbiter your first feature?
I had made a feature early on, right out of college, called The Empty Acre, which was kind of like this no budget shot on mini DV film that is more of a mood film than anything. I mean, I did it with no money. When I say I did it, we did it, our crew and stuff. And so it was all shot around Kansas on a farm. And it's this very weird, almost Lynchian film. I was in a really weird place when I made it and it came out. I think it's on Tubi. It's looking at it now. It's one of those movies where I would do it completely different now. And I was right out of film school when I did it. So, but Nailbiter was the first feature film I did where I actually had a budget and to work with. And so I always kind of consider Nailbiter to be my first true feature. But then we went straight into Enclosure, which was, it was funny because I wanted to make a camping horror movie, but do it from a completely different. I mean, the thing is that like each film I make, I like to take it from a different perspective that's been done before, which is, I think, important to me because I don't want to do the same thing that other people have done. And so I do a lot of camping. My wife and I do a lot of camping. We did more camping before we had kids, but the movie Enclosure, which became Arbor Demon, we had written the script. Michelle Davidson was my co-writer on the film, and we wrote this screenplay that kind of dealt with a married couple and their first time pregnancy and all that. So at the time, my wife was pregnant with our first child. So it was one of those things where I was kind of, when I was writing it, I was putting a lot of that into the script. But then it becomes a monster movie from that point. And it's more of like, I don't know if you've ever seen Hitchcock's Lifeboat. It has a very like, claustrophobic aspect to it where they're all in a tent and, the majority, it becomes a three-hander at that point with the 3 actors. And they're dealing with the fact that they're surrounded by these creatures and there's manipulation happening within the tent and stuff like that. And we had originally wrote the script for the Ozarks. We were going to film in the Ozarks because that's like 2.5, 3 hours away from from Kansas City. And then we managed to get financing in Charleston, South Carolina. So we had to rewrite the script to fit that area, the Low Country, and changing the lore of the creatures and stuff like that. So we had to do kind of a quick rewrite. But that movie was shot in 12 days in Charleston, South Carolina. Yeah, 12 days. Fiona Dourif, Jake Busey, Kevin Ryan were my 3 leads, and all the exterior of the tent was done in the woods, in the Low Country, and all of the interior stuff of the tent was done on a soundstage. So we had split the time up where we were out in the woods, and it was funny. We shot in December in Charleston. It was like a week before Christmas that we were filming, but you couldn't tell because it was still like 70 degrees outside. But the problem was the sun would go down really, really early. So we had a very limited amount of time to get what we needed outside. And then we would then pick it up on the soundstage with the stuff inside the tent so we could actually control the light and not have to worry about the sun going down too early. So, but we shot the whole thing in 12 days. And then when we premiered the movie at Fright Fest in London, and it was called Enclosure until about 2 months from the release date. And then the distributor decided to change the title to Arbor Demon, which I will be fully honest, I was not crazy about.
Right.
I came from Nebraska, and that's the home of Arbor Day. And so I was just like, no, please don't. But at the time, because it was 2017, at the time, the VOD was alphabetized. Pay-per-view and all that stuff. And so their thought process was we need an A title to, so it shows up early on the list, because they were explaining to me that basically the A's make hundreds of thousands of dollars more than the middle of the alphabet, blah, blah, blah. And that could very well have been true at the time. But I was sending them, they're like, well, we want you to send us all your A title possibilities. And so Michelle and I sent them like 50 options. They didn't pick any of them. So they chose that one. And I've had to, it is what it is. At this point, I've gotten used to it, but it didn't change the movie itself, which is why it did give away some of the creature aspects, but I have since grown to accept it.
Because I was talking about it on Threads.
Yeah.
And usually when I drop a movie and they're like, okay, just give me like real quick, what a camping, thriller in the tent.
Yeah.
Monster movie outside the tent. So putting it on my watch list. So it doesn't really tell.
Yeah.
But I hear you. And
well, and Enclosure is still the title in the UK. And for whatever reason, Plex has it listed as Enclosure when you go to Plex. I'm not sure why but a lot of people know it for both titles. And so, there must have been, there's a method to their madness when it comes to that kind of thing. And at the time now it's nothing like that. There's nothing alphabetized. It's all completely different. But in 2017, that definitely was the case. And I just remember, was it American Honey and Arbor Demon came out around the same time, and we were like neck and neck on the list next to. I was like, all right, well.
Well, Demon in the title, though. Horror fans are going to be like, I want to put that on the list. We'll watch it. Whatever it is.
I think the movie has gotten, it's funny. It was in some article this last week as a holiday horror movie because of Arbor Day. And I was like, well, why not?
Sure.
Why not?
That's so funny.
And so after that movie, I ended up doing a family film. It was called Belong to Us. It was kind of an interesting situation where the director and writer, she had to drop out for personal reasons, but stayed on as a producer. And she called me up and she's like, hey, I want to make this movie. And I said I would do it. And so we made it in the summer of 2016. And that movie is on Peacock right now. And it's, it's a fun movie, and it was a change of pace for me. But then immediately after that movie was completed, I went right back into the horror genre because that's where I feel happiest. And so we made I Am Lisa at that point. So,
man, I Am Lisa is brutal. I expected it to be brutal,
It's so funny.
Like,
it's so funny your reaction to that, because it's like some people were complaining that it wasn't brutal enough, and I was just like, I don't, the writer of that movie. It's a funny story on how he and I met. I cast his son in the family film. So Eric Winkler was on set with me, and he was always pitching me this female werewolf revenge movie. And I was like, okay. And then flash forward 3 years later, and we're actually shooting. So, and it was one of the hottest summers in Kansas City. It was ridiculously hot. And we cast this lead actress, Kristen Vaganos, as the lead, and she is now on General Hospital as one of the principal actors on that show. Great person to work with. That was one of the most fun film shoots I've ever had. 14 days, again, a very small schedule. I mean, we shot the movie for under $100,000. So the fact that, it was on MovieWeb's a couple of days ago, MovieWeb put out a list of the top 10 werewolf movies of the 2020s, and they had it listed at number 5. And I mean, if you compare our, literally, I think Wolfman was number 4, and I'm like, oh, they had $25 million, and we had, I think we shot the movie for $75,000, and then we did, another 25 in post and all that stuff. So, I mean, these are very small budget movies, and so, to be included, we try to milk the budgets as much as we can and make it look as good as possible. But yeah, no, that was a fun shoot. And yeah, the movie is brutal. And I sometimes forget that because I've been looking at it for so long when I was editing it. I haven't watched it really since we finished the movie, It came out it was a Redbox exclusive in 2021, meaning it was just in the kiosks around the country. And that was the only place it was available for the first 3 months before it went to streaming and DVD and Blu-ray, and it's on Peacock now and Screenbox and stuff like that. But that's another movie we want to make a sequel to, and it's just one of those things where we have these grand ambitions for the sequels, and it's just somebody rain money upon us, and, it is, and that's a very frustrating part. It's a reality of what we do, is that it's. You always want to up the ante with the second one and make it bigger and better. And it's just finding the money.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I'm sure you got all the Ginger Snap fans with that one.
Here's the funny thing. I have never seen any of the Ginger Snaps movies. It was funny because that was almost intentional while we were making it, because, everybody's like, you need to watch Ginger Snaps. And I'm like, I don't want it to alter my, what I'm, and they had millions of dollars, a couple $1 million budget for that movie. And we were doing it obviously for way less. But yeah, it seems to me like that movie, it gets an interesting reaction from people, because a lot of people love it. And then there's the haters who think that we didn't go far enough with the werewolf effects. And it was one of those things where, honestly, if we had done a full werewolf suit, people would have complained about that. So it was like, pick which way you want to go with it. 'Cause we didn't have the money to do something like, obviously, American Werewolf in London.
Right.
And it's like, well, if that's the case, let's do something a little bit more restrained and keep the actress visible under the makeup, so we still have some emotional connection to her. At least that was my thought process. And in some ways, people liked that, and other people didn't like it. But it was like one of those things where I had to make a choice. Clearly we were not going to do CGI because it never looks good. In fact, there's maybe 1 or 2 CGI shots in that entire movie. Everything else is practical.
Yeah, well, it was really good. And I can see where people would have a problem with not going far enough, because you suggested more than you showed. But I could argue, let your imagination do the rest of the work.
Right. I had to think about who was going to be more upset. You got the restrained version, but if you go into a werewolf suit, it just becomes so cheesy. It could become so bad. And then you're like, well, and then everybody's going to get mad about that, and they'll say, well, he should have held back more. And so you just have to decide what poison you want to drink from what you want to take. And so we made the decision, to kind of keep her a little bit more human.
Right.
My way of explaining it was Wolf with Jack Nicholson. You kept the actor in there, and nobody complained about that movie. So it's like, but you're always going to have people who get upset, and I found that the LGBTQ community really likes the movie, which I was appreciative. And then after I Am Lisa, that one did very, very well. In fact, that movie's made back at least 3 times its budget at this point.
Great.
On streaming and stuff like that. So we, continue to pursue a sequel while we're working on other things. And so I made a movie called They Wait in the Dark after that, which is a little bit more of a psychological haunted house disturbing film that we shot mostly outside of Topeka, Kansas, actually. And again, it was a 12-day shoot. I've managed to make movies in 12 days a lot, and it's so when people say, "Hey, you get 15 days," I'm like, "Oh my god, this is great." Most people say 15 is impossible. So, They Wait in the Dark is an interesting movie in the sense that we premiered that one again at Fright Fest in London, and I got my first New York Times review with that movie, and it was positive. So I was like, very thankful for that. Somebody sent me the linked New York Times review that day. I literally broke into a sweat because I was like, just tell me right now, good or bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's like that could have been the end right there. So that movie, this is the tricky thing. And again, this is just the reality of filmmaking. We went with a distributor who owned Redbox and also owned Crackle. And they declared bankruptcy last year.
Oh, yeah.
So, the company was called Chicken Soup for the Soul, and we went with a company called 1091 Pictures, and they're under the umbrella of Chicken Soup for the Soul, along with Redbox, Crackle, and then Screen Media, I think is the other company. And so they all just disappeared. The movie remained on all of the streaming platforms. The money is going into a black hole that people rented at this point. So luckily, we had our contract that if the distributor declares bankruptcy, we can get the rights of the movie back. So now we're setting up with a new distributor for that movie. The trick is that we have to get it off the platforms.
Oh, yeah.
We have to find a way to get it off of Amazon. We have to find a way to get it off of Vudu and all of those platforms ourselves. And it's like, you get the runaround. You can just run around in circles trying to figure out who to talk to get it off the platforms. And then a new distributor will put their logo at the front of the movie and put it back on the platforms. So the things that people are like, you don't learn that in film school. So,
yeah.
But that's a film I'm particularly proud of. I'm very happy with that film. And I feel like it didn't quite get the release that I wanted it to. So it's getting a second chance at life. I mean, it's only been out it came out in 2023, so it hasn't been that long. So we're gonna get it re-released this year. Hopefully Amazon gets back to us because they're the hardest one to get a hold of. It's like, I'm like, can we just call Jeff Bezos and tell him to take but because it's such a big company, nobody knows who to talk to, and it's like it should be just a click and it's done, but it's not.
Right. Of course not.
So,
I was just gonna say I just watched that movie on Crackle, and I'm a little annoyed that you're not getting the money for that.
Yeah, no, it's really weird because it's like we knew the writing was on the wall like 3 or 4 months before it happened, and what ends up happening is all the employees disappear. Right. There's no one to talk to, so you can't just email the company and say, "Hey, we've got these questions. How do we get this movie off of the platform?" It's gone. It's just non-existent. So it becomes, you feel a little helpless in that regard.
Right.
So my producer, Megan, has been reaching out to these companies and trying to get all this stuff figured out. And it's very frustrating, but we do have a new distributor ready to go, which is exciting. And again, it could very well lead to a second chance for the movie. And because again, that's one of my favorite movies I've made. And so I just want to get it back out there,
Sure. Absolutely.
But then, we hit strikes, we hit SAG strikes, writer strikes, we hit COVID, we hit all these things. And so, I ended up making the found footage movie, but that was like was like done with nobody. And we just went out and everybody committed to making it. And it's going to be coming out this year through Terror Films. And
Cool.
so I'm not sure I was supposed to tell you that. I don't know if it's secret. They haven't officially announced it, but I mean, it's supposed to be coming out sometime this year. It's going through the quality control check right now. But yeah, I think that it's one of those things where we wanted to do something completely different with the found footage thing. I made a rule. I said, there will be no woods in this movie. There will be no people running through the woods screaming, nobody banging in houses. I said, it's going to be like urban. So we basically shot a lot of it in parts of Kansas City that are very like kind of, I wouldn't say they're empty at night per se. So like we were able to kind of go out there and shoot in the middle of the street at, 11 o'clock at night and not get in trouble. But, I wanted to give it a much different feel. And it starts off kind of like a comedy, and it's a woman and her brother, and they're blogging about her dates that she goes on and all that. And she ends up inadvertently ending up on a date with a vampire. And from there on, hilarity ensues.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. And we just, again, like we wanted to have fun. We wanted to do something a little different. And it was my response to waiting on financing for a different project. I was like, okay, look, we have the capabilities of just going out, making a movie if everyone commits. And so we just went out and made it happen. And, it hopefully looks like we had a budget, but so, I mean, hopefully the found footage community will have fun with it. I mean, and Terror Films did a great job with the Hell House series. So I'm hoping that they'll do a good job with this as well. So
yeah. I think people who liked Cloverfield and Diary of the Dead will actually like it, because I was sitting there and watching it. I was like, it's like Cloverfield. That's cool. And they're not being chased by zombies or anything, which actually is better, because we have a crap ton of found footage movies that it's just zombies and people running.
Yeah,
this was actually kind of refreshing.
And the vampire hunters are actually the bad guys in this movie.
Right.
Yeah. So that was kind of my idea, was just to kind of go out and I get to have a cameo in it, and that was
was that you? I was wondering that.
Yeah, it was me. I get my throat ripped out. We shot that at like spoiler. We shot that like 2 a.m. in a parking lot. And I was just like, this is great. But yeah, no, it was a good time, and so hopefully people have a fun. It premiered at Popcorn Frights, which is a pretty good film festival in Florida. And maybe we'll go out and pick it up where we left off. That'll be easier to make a sequel to, because we can just go do it. But and then we started shooting Super Happy Fun Clown right after. And that one took longer than 12 days, guys.
I believe.
And so that one is going through post, and I would say that it's, again, like it's not like Terrifier. So I mean, you can't compare it to that. It's a female clown, of course, but it's more of it's a dark comedy, very dark comedy, I would say.
Excited.
Dark horror comedy. And it's a lot of fun, and I think I'm really happy with it, and hopefully it has its festival premiere very soon. So
and you plan for that to come out this year?
Yeah, I mean, we have a sales agent already, and we're just kind of looking at, I mean, we're going to see where we premiere it at the film festivals first.
Okay.
And that will kind of determine the where the next step is going to be and stuff. So my hope is this is like later this year it gets released.
Okay.
Cool.
So and then in between, I'm always making short films. I'm never going to stop making short films. People kind of ask me why I do that, and a lot of it is because I get bored. I mean, it's like one of those things where making a feature takes so long.
Right.
And in between, you have to keep your creative juices flowing, and you got to keep busy, and you're ultimately there. I like to make movies, and it doesn't matter if it's short or a feature. I just like to do it. So, if a short film comes along and I like the idea of it, then I'll do it.
How many do you figure you make a year?
I made 2 last year, 1 or 2 a year now. I used to be a lot more, but I've been doing more features now. So,
okay.
I mean, back in the day when we were just like going out and just making stuff, it was like we were doing 5 or 6 a year. But now it's and several of my short films are on Screenbox with Bloody Bites, that short film show on Screenbox.
Yeah.
I have a couple in the first season. I've got one called Fused and one called Spiritual Practice that are in the first season of Bloody Bites, and then I've got more as a couple other seasons and stuff. So, but yeah, when it comes to like my older short films, a lot of them are part of these anthologies that are circulating. And I just never know when they're going to pop up. I remember one day I was on Screenbox and I saw I was like, oh, it's a horror anthology. And I'm like, wow, this is like 2/3 my short films.
Wow.
So it's always a little bit of a surprise. But I always tell people those movies would never see the light of day anymore if it wasn't for the anthology. Yeah. So in many ways, a lot of them are not as well made, but that's part of the growth of being a filmmaker. The cameras got better. I got better. The crew got better. Like, it's just one of those things where there's a learning curve and you hopefully keep getting better instead of going backwards. So, for me, it's fun to just see some of those older films still out there, but then there's always going to be the people, because it comes out now and they're seeing it. And the movie was made in 2008. They're like, why is this not as well put together, or doesn't look as good? And you're like, well, it was made 17 years ago, and so it's kind of hard to compare, and you just have to kind of be okay with that and move on,
And you were talking about you license your shorts. How do you do that? Explain that.
Well, for example, with Bloody Bites, they have a licensing. They license your short film. You sign for a specific amount of time. It's non-exclusive, which means you can still do other things with the short film. You're not in an exclusive agreement with them. And then they obviously renew every year or two. So yeah, it's just and it's not a lot of money in any sense, but you obviously, it's an opportunity for a lot of short filmmakers to get their films seen on a popular streaming platform and get more and get an audience. In some ways, that's how a lot of directors get their first feature made, is with their short films. So
right. And I always want to see the shorts, and I'm always trying to find out where to see the shorts that I see on IMDb, and usually I can't find them. So I'm the one that I buy the big packs, 50 movies, and and that's me. I buy all those.
Yeah.
The 20, all of them, because how else am I going to see them?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think things like Screenbox now and it's really helping the indie filmmakers get their films out there and stuff. And I wish Shudder would do. They've got on a smaller scale, but I wish they would do a short film series as well, like Bloody Bites is on Screenbox. Because I just think it's a good opportunity for filmmakers to get their short work out there, because there is a point where you play enough film festivals and then you're like, what do I do with it now? Do I just retire it? Do I just throw it up on YouTube? And so, it's a new opportunity, and I think it's a good one. The guy, Tony Walsh, is the one who's in charge of Bloody Bites, and he's a great guy. And he's, I think, head of programming now for Screenbox, the streaming platform. So kudos to him. They're the ones who put out the Terrifier movies, Screenbox, Bloody Disgusting. It's all the same.
Okay, yeah.
Cineverse. It's all one company.
How do you because you do so many shorts, how do you find the funding for those?
They're all different. And so I just did one called Blood Sisters, and that was financed, but the producers raised the money on GoFundMe, I believe. It was the one they used. And then I've had a couple where an actor will reach out to me and say, I want to be a lead in a short, write me a script, and I will put XYZ or this amount of money into it. And then sometimes the writer approaches me and says, I've got some money. I want to make this film. Will you direct it? So it differs. It's different each time,
Yeah, okay.
So, and then I have one right now on the it's actually going to be playing at the Omaha Film Festival next month, called Icebox, and that was funded by a grant a Missouri film grant. So again, like they're all just different. And the features are the same way. Like everybody's like, well, how do you get your feature funded? I'm like, it differs from like the family film was financed obviously by the writer. And then, it just happens to just work out in a different way. And, with Super Happy Fun Clown, we use some money that we made off of I Am Lisa and put it into Super Happy Fun Clown. And then we had other investors come in at that point. And so I always tell people have a good business plan and I wouldn't say it's easier each time you make a movie, but it does help to have other movies to show, look here, this movie's on this platform. This movie's on this platform. You're no longer a first time director. And the thing is, Nailbiter was the hardest out of all of them. I think that movie took 4 years just to get from point A to point B. Wow. And a lot of that was because I was a lot more unproven at that point, Yeah.
Right. So where did your idea for Super Happy Fun Clown come from?
That was the writer of I Am Lisa, Eric Winkler. He wrote the script and he wrote it for the actress who's in the movie, who's a friend of ours, Jennifer Seward. And so he came up with the script and then we just went for it. And again, like the movie's definitely a good blend of horror and comedy. And I think it'll appeal to women the most. I really believe that. So cool. It's like it's a female Terrifier, but it's not like that movie. Like it really isn't. It's like much more of a it has a lot more drama to it, and it's just commentary on trying to live up to your mom's expectations and all that stuff. There's a lot more to it in that regard. So
right. Okay, remind us what's coming out this year.
Well, The Night is Young, the found footage movie, will be released at some point this year. I'm waiting. They just finished the poster, or they took my original poster and they made it a little shinier. They just finished that last week, so it means that I'm sure we're getting close to something at this point with the release date. And then Super Happy Fun Clown, I think we're going to do the festival route first, see where it lands, and then we'll figure out where we're going to go with distribution from there. And in the meantime, I'm just trying to get whatever I'm going to direct next off the ground, or at least figure out what I'm going to do. And there's just several. It's funny because there's like 10 things I want to do, and then you have to decide, well, which one of these am I going to spend an entire 2 years on? Because they always take about a year to 2 years to get from pre-production to distribution. And so it's like, okay, well, which one of these excites me the most? And it's kind of hard to decide. It really is.
Right.
Well, the problem now is with your last two, you've done werewolves, clowns, vampires. Now you gotta do ghosts, right? You gotta do zombies. You gotta cover all of the.
I don't have a zombie idea yet. Really, I've been kind of wanting to, but it's, to be perfectly honest, my least favorite subgenre of horror is zombies. And so it is. And so you have to find something that's a completely different, fresh idea. I really, really, really want to make a slasher movie. I really do. Because it's like, surprisingly, that's my favorite subgenre of horror. And I've never made a slasher movie. And I yet to have a concept that really gets me excited. And sometimes it's like, well, maybe it just needs to be simple and back to basics and not have a hook. That a lot of these have these completely, like, you've got the time travel slasher movie, you've got the, It's a Wonderful Life meets a slasher movie. And it's like, each one of these has got like a specific hook. And it's like, maybe you just need something straight, simple, but I don't know. It keeps me up at night because I really want to do a slasher movie at some point, but I don't want to blow it. It's like my favorite subgenre. And I know it's overdone and everything has been done under the sun.
Well, but, maybe like a point of view slasher.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean,
that could be interesting.
Did you guys see In a Violent Nature by chance?
Sure did.
Yep. Yeah, I liked that. That was different.
Yeah,
I liked that. And yet simple. And that's the thing is, the same thing with I haven't seen Hard Eyes yet, but I hear great things about it. And So
do an Arbor Day slasher and reclaim the.
I think somebody actually is doing that. I think I saw.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were. So I mean, again, like I'll come up with something at some point, but that's kind of been the one thing lingering over me. It's funny because I mean, it's like I really want to do. Every time I see a slasher movie, I'm like, I really want to do one of these, but I don't know what to do yet. So, and maybe it'll hit me. Hopefully, before I'm too old to do it. So
you're constantly making movies. Surely,
yeah,
something will come.
Yeah. But then it becomes, again, like you don't want to have it has to be new, but the same sometimes, you know, it's like, you don't want to make it so different that nobody can get into it, but you have to, have elements that are tried and true, and work for a reason, but yet have it from a fresh perspective, which the first Scream was like the best at that. That was like why, at that point, the slasher genre was on its, last leg. And then all of a sudden it revitalized. And now we're on Scream 7 at this point. So
right. Did you see The Conference? I believe it's on Netflix. That's a slasher.
Oh, I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always just I watch a lot of horror, so I'm always looking for inspiration. And I saw Companion recently, and I was just blown away by it. I thought it was excellent. And again, a movie that had some similarities to other movies, but did it from kind of a new perspective. But we're still making movies out here in Kansas City, and I worked with a lot of the same people, and so hopefully we continue to do it and grow and get better. And I feel like some of these features that I've made continue to get somewhat of a new audience.
Yeah,
they haven't really faded away, which is good. So it feels like when I do things like this and meet people like you guys, it's like you guys have just discovered some of these movies, and so you're like, able to keep those movies alive. It's like, Nailbiter. I'm like, it's gone, and then it gets a lifeline with Tubi, and then other people start seeing it, or people say that Arbor Demon is an Arbor Day movie. I'm like, well, whatever. If you watch it,
yeah, exactly.
Spread the word, and because these are all like really hard to make.
Right.
And, I'm always telling people at the end of the day, I'm amazed it gets finished and it's coherent, because you're like, there's so many things that come into play to make a movie. And it's always like a barn raising, you've got this crew that's, amazing. And it's such a team effort, collaborative. And if you have one thing that doesn't quite work, it can affect the entire process. And because you've got such little money, you don't have that much margin for error. Like, if you're making a Hollywood movie, you're like, well, that didn't work. We'll just throw $10 million at fixing the problem. Like you can't do that,
Right.
So really it requires so much meticulous planning and making sure that all the elements line up and such. And there's just a lot of, time that goes in. You don't have a lot of money, but you have time, so it's really about getting the right people and casting and all that and being prepared, because you can prepare as much as you want, and then something you don't see coming happens, whether it's an actor getting sick or the weather. I mean, Kansas City, the weather is just pretty unpredictable at times. So, and I remember on I Am Lisa, there was a day where it was going to be like 103 in the shade, and the meteorologist was like, "Don't go outside if you don't have to." And we looked at the schedule, and we're like, if we move this day, we cause a chain reaction in the schedule that could screw up everything. I mean, I feel like Enclosure was the hardest movie to make out of all.
Right.
I was out of my comfort zone, which I think that was a great thing. I would never change a thing about it, because I went to Charleston. I didn't work with the crew I normally worked with. I worked with a great group of people, but it was challenging in that regard because we had very little time. We were shooting around the holidays, and it was just one of those things where I had 12 days. I had to rewrite the script because most of the movie was set at night. And when we got to Charleston, they were like, we're going to have to shoot during the day. So you're going to have to flip the time of day in the script. And, it was just really tricky. And, but it was good for me. I will say that I wouldn't change a thing, because it really, now when I hear 12 days, I'm like, I can do that. But then before that, Before that, I was like, there's just no way, because Nailbiter was my longest shoot that I ever had, because we had to break it up because we ran out of money halfway through making the movie.
Mm.
So there is a part in that movie in Nailbiter where an actor turns around in a scene. It's a year later.
That's kind of amazing, though.
And nobody will never know.
Well, now I'm gonna.
They will.
We ran out of money, and we ran out of money, and we stopped at a specific point in the script and picked it up right there a year later.
Wow.
And I had everything edited up until that point, so that when the actor turned around, we literally just kept going.
That's awesome.
And nobody, but because of that, that was my longest film shoot. It was just very, very long. I don't even know how many days we shot on that movie. But then when Enclosure was brought to, when we started doing that movie, I wrote it specifically so that it could be done fast because it's mostly in the tent, but I didn't think 12 days was going to be enough, but it had to work. And so we made it work. And so that would be, I think that was the biggest challenge. And, it was a thing where post-production was spread out across the country on that movie. Normally everything is kind of consolidated, in Kansas City. It's changed a little bit now with the way things are now, but because like with Super Happy Fun Clown, I had one effects guy in Denver, I had one effects guy in Los Angeles, and but the sound was done in Kansas City, and the music has been done in Kansas City. But with Enclosure or Arbor Demon, whatever you want to call it, the music was done in Kansas. The sound was done in Los Angeles, and it was my first time doing that, where I couldn't just drive over to their house and look at what they were doing, so that made it challenging. But again, like, it was growing pains.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important.
I love that movie. So if that was you struggling,
keep telling people to watch it. I mean, that's the thing. Like,
I will.
I all of these movies kind of live and die off of slow cult followings, and that's the thing, is it's because they're not getting the blockbuster releases, and so they definitely they live and die by word of mouth. And the fact that it's 2025 and I'm still talking about them, I guess, is a good sign.
Yeah.
You're gonna be in your 60s, and then people will be asking you to come to conventions for that, and they'll have the tattoos of it and shit.
You never know. Yeah. I mean, we can only hope, and I, again, like, I'm just grateful that I get to do this, because this is all I've ever wanted to do. And so it's, but I can't pretend it's easy in any way, because it's not. I mean, there are days where it's just so unbelievably frustrating. And I think if you ask any filmmaker, that's par for the course. It's always an uphill battle and uncertainty. And if you like certainty, you should not be a filmmaker.
Right. I hear that.
So.
Wait a minute. Arbor Demon has physical copies. Wow.
It does. Thank
you very much.
They Wait in the Dark was my first movie to not get a physical release, and I was very disappointed, but we reached it. And now, maybe with the new distributions that we're going to be setting up, it will get some sort of physical media. But physical media is really hard now. Like, it just is.
Wow.
To get a decent release.
Right. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because we're always, is there going to be a physical release? Streamings, they're trying to make everything streaming.
I feel like horror is one of the only genres keeping physical media alive.
Yeah.
Because they're collectors. You don't hear about like people who collect romantic comedies. I'm sure there are people who do that, but like horror, you specifically, there's all these boutique distribution companies. And so, I mean, so there's hope, that it'll continue in that regard. But yeah, I was pretty disappointed that we didn't get a physical media release on They Wait in the Dark, but my hope is that it'll happen eventually. So
I hope so, because I want to buy it. But hopefully by the time I release this post, I'll have a little stack of yours. And what's terrible is there's going to be bootleggers. You don't do a physical release and it's popular.
Yeah, that's
the
true.
Bootleggers are going to get that money.
Yeah.
And our Carlos here, he is starting to make movies finally.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, do you have any words of wisdom for anybody who's just starting?
my big piece of advice to everybody is work with people you like. Obviously, I think that's a big thing. Is it's a collaborative process, and so you got to work with people that you enjoy working with, and one bad apple can spoil everything, and so you just collaborate with people that you enjoy working with, and keep a sense of humor, because I think that helps me when something goes wrong, and if I can laugh about it, that keeps me from going crazy. So it was one of those things where I think it was Kevin Wilmott who actually told me after I graduated from film school, is find something to laugh about, because it's, when something goes wrong, and something will go wrong inevitably, you got to find humor in it, and because it's a process, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you got to find things to make you laugh along the way, especially when you get to the hard stuff. Like distribution can be such a pain in the butt, but if you can find some humor in it along the way, and I think my biggest piece of advice is don't talk yourself out of doing it. I think a lot of people, they think that they need to make The Godfather right out of the gate. And it's like, you can't, you're not going to. You're going to be making some movies that maybe you're not as proud of, but you got to get through that to get to the stuff that you are going to be proud of. And so I think there's a little bit of fear that comes with fear of failure. And I think you just need to embrace the failure aspect of it, because not making anything is actually way worse. Yeah. So you just have to kind of go out and just, now that there's, cameras everywhere, you really don't have much of an excuse. You don't have as much preventing you from making a movie now, and, I think if you get good at it, obviously one of my other big pieces of advice is have good sound. Yeah. Like it's so funny because we're still working on the sound mix of Super Happy Fun Clown, and the movie is beautiful looking, but the sound mix is still a work in progress. And so when you show it to people, they're like, well, the sound isn't done. I'm like, I know. That if you watch it, you could watch the most beautiful looking movie, and if the sound doesn't work, it doesn't matter. And it's like I always use Paranormal Activity as an example. That movie is basically surveillance footage and cheap handycam footage, but the sound is incredible.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can hear it all around you in the theater. And so, I always tell people, sound design the movie is 75% sound in many ways, Yeah,
totally. I'm actually going through that right now with one of my shorts that I released, and we had a festival circuit and we did decently, but looking back at it, I'm like, our sound was not great on that. And so like working on a new sound mix, it's just night and day difference.
Yeah, no, it really is. And it's time consuming. Good, fast, cheap, pick two, and that's why I always tell people, don't rush it. I know you want to get your movie out. I always tell people, yes, but we have to get it right. And so, it takes time, and you got to find people who are committed and excited about it. And as a director, you're always like the master cheerleader. And so you just have to be kind and yet obviously still be productive. But there's no excuse to treat people like crap. I know there's filmmakers that, they're a one and done because they treat their crew poorly. Nobody comes back. Unless the movie's a massive success, they don't come back, And so I always tell people, treat people with respect. Even if you make a bad movie, they'll still come back if that's the case,
Right. You let us know when that movie's coming out, and the whole release thing and everything, and we'll put you
on for sure. For sure.
All right. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks, totally. Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
This is the #1 place for macabish cults, classics, and horrors. For synopsis, reviews, and news, go to macabish.com. Thank you for listening. Signing out until the next one.